The Big Issue. Breaking down the issues that matter.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leadership Podcast. It's another edition of The Big Issue, and as usual, I'm your regular host, George Agba, and of course, with me here in the studio, our in-house analyst. We have Chibuzo Kaibe.
Thank you.
And Paul Agbo.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we will not start taking much of your time. We'll just go into the big issue of the day, which is insecurity and INEC's alarm over impending postponement of the 2023 general election. Just as Nigerians were beginning to settle for the fact that the elections in 2023 would be hitch-free and might not witness any security challenges, the Independent National Electoral Commission on Monday stunned the public when it said that the forthcoming general election faces the threat of being cancelled if the level of insecurity across the country persists. And of course, INEC's position is actually aligning with recent reports suggesting that despite the deadline given by the military given to the military by President Muhammadu Buhari to end insecurity by December, killings have continued unabated in the country. And of course, the recent abduction of train passengers in a train station in Edo State, and other forms of killings and abduction by bandits and kidnappers in the country. Well, Paul, this is a report that has been there, and we are beginning to see reasons why we should agree with INEC. But one thing we should look at first is that it has become a trend that every election year, issues of insecurity will pop up. If you remember, in 2015, the general election was postponed. For what reason? Insecurity. In 2019, the elections were postponed again. And now INEC is still coming with the same issue, that 2023 election will be postponed.
May likely
be postponed if the kind of insecurity witnessed in the country continues. That calls for concern, and I think something has to be done immediately, because if not, I think this postponement this year can even be more than what we have witnessed in the past. What do you think?
It's a sign of incompetence, not on the part of INEC, because INEC does not bear arms. INEC does not, in the act establishing the commission, does not deal with security issues. In fact, the state ought to provide the necessary protection for INEC to do its work across the country, which is to deliver to Nigeria a free, fair, and credible election. So it is the failure of the state to provide the constitutionally guaranteed security. I think Section 4 also states that of the Constitution, the welfare and security of Nigerian citizens is the primary responsibility of the government. So it's a failure of the state, and it gives Nigeria a very bad image before her peers in the international community. If a state cannot provide security for her citizens, and the electoral body, the major electoral body in the country, feel threatened by the state of affairs and now giving synopsis or a tips of what may likely come in February, election postponement is not a good thing. It's a sign of failure of the present administration. 7.5 years. 7.5 years. We are still discussing, talking the same issue. Insecurity. And it's one of the cardinal promises made by this current administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. It's a failure. And if, God forbid, if the election is postponed, Nigeria, it will further sink Nigeria's image in the international community down. It's not good. We should be able to have an electoral cycle, just like our other democracies around the world. It is unthinkable. It is not something Americans will think that, look, elections may likely be postponed in the US. It is a calendar that has been maintained for over 200 years. You saw what happened recently in the process leading to the election of the current speaker, Kevin McCarthy, 15 rounds. You see, it has it's another history in 160 something years. That is the kind of history democratic state celebrate. Not this one that you talk about the election postponed because of insecurity. What has the state been doing? So, George, I don't have any issue with INEC. In fact, I even sympathize with the management of INEC. They've been victims of the inefficiency of the system. They've been victims. Their offices have been bombed, staffs have been killed, maimed, because the state has failed to provide security for INEC. It is not a good thing.
Well, thank you, Paul. Chibuzolles, who can state Paul on at the end of the day, we won't blame INEC. Who will blame INEC? At the end of the day, we have never seen in the history of this country the way we've seen now the series of attacks on INEC facilities, as if the plan is just to completely ensure that the country does not have an electoral umpire, especially in the southeast. And for it to come out to raise this alarm, it's very, 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 very worrisome. Because according to the commission, that the cancellation and postponement of this election due to the insecurity may not only hinder the declaration of the election result, that it will also precipitate a constitutional crisis. And in the face of this, most people who have been planning to ensure that the election does not hold this, they capitalize on that and then use that as an advantage. That means this issue, somebody had said something about interim government. Are you not beginning to see a situation where we might begin to now understand that there might be an interim government in place? The way, there was an alarm raised that there is a plan to scuttle the election, to now form an interim government and so forth. This is where it might be leading us to. Don't you think so?
Well, thank you. I will continue from where I stopped yesterday with regards to what we discussed about INEC. And where I stopped yesterday was about what the president is supposed to do, because he is, or the presidency. Let me put it that way, so that I don't
become personal.
I don't put him as I don't make him stick out like a sore thumb.
No, but you will not be out of place. You will not be out of place, Chibuzo, if you do that.
I agree with you.
Because who is the president? The president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Federal Republic.
Okay. So, because at the end of the day, it comes back to the decisions the executive takes as the, like you said, commander in chief of our entire security architecture. I say this because over and again he has said he wants to leave a legacy. He has repeatedly said he can't wait to retire to Daura. He has said a number of things that for any discerning mind would, expect that, okay, he wants to do the best for the country with regards to ensuring a smooth, swift transition of power to the next person. So if he has repeatedly said these things, one would have expected that all of because INEC is under the presidency, directly under him, the DSS and all of that, all of the security architecture are things all function under his direction and leading. So if a president says this thing over and again, one would have expected that all of these agencies will begin to work in line with fulfilling the wishes of the president, who has said, this is what I expect and this is what I want, with regards to, having a transition process that is smooth and needless of rancor. So it's amazing that the INEC will come up yesterday. In fact, INEC's declaration is more of a cry for help. It shows a complete sense of helplessness that the commission will cry the way it did. And it was really interesting that when all of the INEC offices were attacked, most of them were attacked and all of that, the police will come out and say, we will no longer tolerate these kinds of attack anymore. So you've been tolerating it before. Is that what it meant? Or was it a misrepresentation of what they were supposed to say? So it's really intriguing. It's really intriguing. But like I said, it comes back to the president. The president really has to convince us beyond telling us he can't wait to leave and that he wants to leave a legacy of. He has to really convince us in the way he communicates, whether overtly or covertly, to the security architecture to ensure that we don't have the kind of constitutional crisis that the INEC is trying to point us to. Nigeria is not the only country that will hold elections this year. I think there are about not less than 7 or 8 African countries that will hold elections this year. But I think, well, of course, when you mention Africa, everybody naturally looks to Nigeria. And so when and I think Nigeria is about the first country to have its own election at the start of the year. By next month, we should be talking about this election. If at all it has to be postponed, it can't be more than at most 2 or 3 months, like we did with the Jonathan during the Jonathan time. So we should expect that the whole world will be paying attention to what Nigeria does, not just Africa. We'll be paying serious attention to what Nigeria does. The president should know, and other stakeholders should know, that they can't afford to bungle up what we are about to do in the next couple of weeks. It won't augur well, not just for the country, but for every African, because of the implication it will have. It's beyond Africa, it's beyond Nigeria as we speak. It's going to have a serious implication for Africa.
Well, thank you, Chibuzo. Well, I think what INEC is even saying, the alarm it is even raising is completely at variance with what the position of the president, who is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And we'll quickly take a short break now. And when we come back, I will show you what Buhari thinks about insecurity. And you know that it is not in tandem with what INEC is thinking. Well, let's just quickly take a short break, at least to do some kind of announcements, create some kind of awareness. And as we do so, we hope that our viewers will start contributing constructively to the conversation on the big issue by sending in their comment. Don't go offline. We'll be back in a moment.
For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.
The Big Issue. Breaking down the issues that matter.
Welcome back. We are still on the Big Issue in Leadership Podcast. And of course, the big issue of the day is the alarm raised by the country's electoral umpire that if something is not done to nip the growing insecurity in the country, in the board, the 2023 general election may be postponed. But what INEC is actually saying here does not really correspond with what the president thinks about insecurity. At a state banquet on Monday night in Yobe State, President Buhari said he has fulfilled his promise that he promised Nigeria in 2015 and in 2019 of tackling insecurity, and narrowed it down to Boko Haram in the northeast. And hear what Buhari said. He said he has fulfilled the commitment made to Nigerians in his May 29, 2015 inaugural address to frontally and courageously tackle Boko Haram terrorists and stabilize the country. Look at, and I quote him, in the northeast, God has helped us to clear Boko Haram. The economy has picked up, and some people are asking me about the achievement of my promise to fight corruption. And when it comes to corruption, he says he thanks God that nobody can even blackmail him on that because his hands are clean. He does not even have a time or any asset. Anybody can hold him outside the country or within the country. But let's look at still on the insecurity. If the president and commander-in-chief feels that he has fulfilled his promise of tackling insecurity frontally,
Yes.
then which insecurity is INEC raising the alarm about?
The president is.
Yes, we should be expecting that the 2023 election should be free of violence and insecurity.
The president spoke based on the report he gets on a daily basis of the security situation around the corner, and in particular the northeast, where he made that statement. Would you blame him? The president is not as commander-in-chief. Well, we don't expect him to be in the field on a daily, weekly basis. He gets reports, and you and I know that. Look, these are filtered reports. The negatives in the reports are always not there. I'm not privy to see it, but the Chinese will say you cannot carve a rotten wood, and it's a fact that the rotten wood can never be carved. INEC is raising the alarm based on the evidence on ground of insecurity, how its facility have been attacked in the last few months. So I'm not privy to what the president gets on a daily basis as security reports, but the president, I will not blame him because he spoke based on the report he received. But that's his adherence, with due respect to his minders, his adherence to what is actually on the ground. Take for instance, if he said the country, his government has stabilized the country and they've tackled Boko Haram, if Nigeria as a state has tackled Boko Haram, why is it that Maiduguri remains the capital of IDP in Africa? Why is it that people cannot travel? Can people travel? Can the local government chairman in Baga or Kunduga or Mongunu travel freely to their location and back in Borno State without heavy military escorts? Can the same thing be said of Yobe State? Can someone travel from Damaturu to Gashua freely without being escorted? Can somebody travel from Damaturu to Yunusufari to Nguru, where the Senate President zone? Can they travel around the state without military escort? Even in Adamawa State, can that be said? Only recently, the bandits started attacking Kaduna. So the government has tackled, that's their own understanding of tackling Boko Haram and insecurity around the country. That is a far cry on the truth. And we are here to speak speak truth to the government, of course, and including the minders of the government. The minders of the president should know that, look, posterity will judge them. That, look, you people fed the president with false information. If the federal government has tackled insecurity, INEC will not be lamenting. INEC will not be shouting today.
But how can you say the president does not know the situation? That is talking based on report. That means you are trying to say our own president does not read the news. No, we know it's not even examined.
It's based on.
No,
we don't see the president.
What is even worrying me is that what Paul is actually trying to say is that the president does not even read news. He does not watch television.
Go deeper.
He would have seen the recent
we have a president
where they adopted almost how many people, you know?
Let us not even go deeper. The president went to Imo. Did he pass the night in Imo State?
Of course, it was not even a
Did he pass the night in Cross River State?
Perhaps the arrangement was not.
That is what you say. That is what you say. He is more comfortable in certain parts of the country than others. All these attacks that have been going on in the southeast, has the president traveled to Abia State and stayed overnight?
But you know, his minders will quickly argue that he passed the night in Yobe, and that Yobe has been an unstable place for a while. They might put up that argument. But you know, again, for me, as far as I'm concerned, the buck stops with the president.
Of course. Chibuzo agree with you
regardless of whether, and that's where I have a different thing. Regardless of whether whatever they feed him, at the end of the day, it comes back to him. Nobody sees the people who gives him
information. It isn't tell.
But it comes back to him. And that is why I still go back to, because it's unfortunate that we have had not less than 50 attacks on INEC institutions. 50 in the last 4 years. 50 in the last 4 years.
That's alarming.
After the last one we had in Imo, the police was saying we no longer. I say it again. We no longer tolerate this.
I mean, they have been tolerating.
People have been striking for hitting state institutions 50 good times. How does it sound? Nobody has been fired. Nobody has been sacked. People have been caught, so they can't identify the sponsors because it's not about who was caught. People that they caught are just errand boys. Nobody has identified who are sponsoring these things. It tells
and
so
you have
much.
State apparatus of powers, including intelligence,
exactly
in all these locations, and yet
nobody
has been pinned down.
You know,
nobody has been arrested. Nobody has been fired. Nobody has been suspended.
It's mind-boggling.
And you say INEC should not raise the alarm. And because INEC doesn't want to see itself to or failed by next month.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's better they start raising their alarm now.
So that now we know that the fault
it's
not from them. But you see, that even brings me to the report in the lead story of leadership. Was it yesterday, where they said that the defense headquarters is keeping more, the federal government is keeping more, despite the expiration of the deadline given by the president himself, that security forces should end killings and all other forms of crimes and criminality in the country. You could recall last year, the Minister of Interior, Raif Aregbosola, at a joint ministerial briefing, said President Buhari had given a December deadline for the security forces to restore order.
10 days after.
And stability in all parts of the country.
10 days. I think a media house did a report that about 37 people have been killed so far in the new year. 37 or so, thereabout. And various insecurity.
And what would have expected?
Related, you are going too far.
In the normal climate.
Last was it on Monday or 2 days ago, 2 or 3 days ago? There was a major attack in Kaduna.
Yes.
Security. I'm not talking about civilians being killed now. Yeah. Security operatives were slain.
And killed. That's the road between Benungwari and Futua in Katsina State.
So one would have expected that, as it is, with what happened within this Yuletide, the killings, even they look at the attack on the train station, we would have been seen heads rolling. For instance, you will not say, "Oh, you, my chief of army staff, chief of defense staff, chief of Nigeria, you didn't meet up what I gave you." So
in the local palace here, they say nothing they happen. And that's what is happening.
So what do you expect?
So it's better. Don't blame INEC. INEC has seen it. That look, if she does not raise the alarm, Nigerians will blame her. The international community will also likely blame INEC for being inefficient. But they are helpless.
Well, in a nutshell, Chibuzo, what is the way forward? Because I remember in 2015, what they did was to postpone this election. And then I think in the process, the then President Jonathan, what he did was to hire mercenaries who they said had come. And they were able to push these Boko Haram terrorists far, far, far to. Then elections were conducted. Now, in this event now, as it is going, what do you think could be the solution for?
What do you want me to say?
Anyway, you are not even a security expert.
Exactly, so that is number one. But how can we be talking about insecurity for the past how many years of this government?
7.5 years.
7.5 years of this government. See, we've had security experts. In fact, we have security experts daily, almost daily, on national television, radio stations, everywhere, trying to tell the government what to do. Isn't that enough for a government that really wants to do what it has to do? So that's why, unfortunately, I'm beginning to sound like a broken record. And I'm going back to the president. Since he has said he wants to leave a legacy, I'm holding him by that. This is an opportunity for him to leave a legacy. This is an opportunity for him to leave a legacy. Let him do all that it will take to ensure the elections, not just hold, because that's another thing now. We don't want a situation where election will hold anyhow. No. Elections that will be transparent, credible, violent, free as much as possible, and transparent, so that there can be a smooth transition of power. That is all. That is the legacy he owes Nigeria. That is the legacy he owes Nigeria. Nobody can teach him what to do. He's a former general, for goodness sake. He's been not just a former general, he's been a former head of state. So there is nothing new to tell him. He knows all that there is to do. But it's about, and I hate to use that expression, political will. It has become so commonly said, political will. Just dismiss the common political. So, but I go back to what he has said, that he wants to leave a legacy. He has between now and when the election holds to prove that he wants to really have a legacy, so that he can retire in peace.
Even if it requires bringing in mercenaries.
Well,
to hold the criminals hostage
I
until
wouldn't-
the
like I
elections.
said, I wouldn't want
just
to
like
tell him what
Jonathan
to
did
do.
in 2015.
That's a temporary measure.
He knows what to do.
The situation is not. My take is this: the situation is
No,
not.
but even if it requires
It's not
temporary measure,
beyond-
Chibuzo, what we are talking here is for the elections to hold. Jonathan did that. Jonathan, when the Jonathan government decided to bring in mercenary, it was a temporary measure to ensure that the elections scale through. Then they can continue with the insecurity. And now we are talking of INEC raising the alarm. If we know that insecurity has become something that is associated with Nigeria, we can keep
It
battling.
is simple.
But for the elections,
It is simple. I am one of those who believe that security agencies, there's a capacity to do the job if they are given free hands. And that is why it
but
keeps,
it's just
it
because
keeps going back
the
to.
government of the day lack
In
the
any
political way.
In any case, yes, in any case, it comes
You
back
see,
to
amount
the-
to you,
it
it's
comes
something like
back
a
to-
broken record.
It's not beyond the capacity of the federal government. I don't want to zero on anybody. It's not beyond the capacity of the federal government. If you notice, over the past 4 or 5 months, there's been some sort of quietness along the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway and even some parts of Niger State. The strategy deployed then to quell that insecurity along these axes, they should repeat or expand that strategy to other parts of the country. That's my take.
Well, that is the much we can take for today's edition of the big issue. Of course, INEC has raised the alarm. It is left for President Muhammadu Buhari's led federal government to nip the issue of insecurity in the bud, pave the way for a very peaceful, free and fair electoral process to take place. And of course, Chibuzo has just said it, that the president himself has said what is all after now is to leave a legacy. And the only way that legacy will be left behind is for the needful to be done, to look for ways to curb insecurity and create a level playing ground for the 2023 election be conducted. Well, thank you for keeping tab with us. And of course, I'll thank our in-house analysts for addressing the big issue. Join us same time tomorrow for another edition of the big issue. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.